So picture this. You start a fantastic new routine. Maybe it's waking up at 5 a.m. to write that novel you've been putting off, or, finally committing to Sunday meal prepping. And man, you feel absolutely unstoppable for those first 48 hours. But then, a few days later, you just inexplicably abandon the whole shebang. Suddenly, hitting the snooze button feels infinitely more important than your big life goals. Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving right into the incredibly frustrating mystery of self-sabotage. We are going to unpack exactly why your own identity actively fights positive change. If you've ever felt like your absolute worst enemy is living rent-free inside your own head, you are exactly where you need to be. Let's figure out what's really going on up there. Let's kick things off with a central, rather provocative question to frame everything. Why on earth do we fight positive change? Seriously. Why is it that the very things we know are objectively good for us often end up being the absolute hardest to maintain? Think about it for a second. We know we want to improve, right? The logic is totally sound. We read all the books, we set the alarms, we buy those expensive running shoes. The desire is 100% there. Yet, the exact moment we actually try to execute, we hit this massive, invisible wall of resistance. It's kind of like wanting the change somehow triggers a hidden biological defense mechanism that actively works to shut the whole operation down before it can even get off the ground. We call this the positive change paradox, and right out of the gate, I want you to completely shift your mindset. This is not a failure of your personal willpower. You can let go of that guilt right now, seriously. You aren't fundamentally flawed, and you certainly aren't lazy. Instead, we need to treat this as a bizarre psychological mystery, where the victim and the perpetrator are literally the exact same person. It's you. You're the one driving the vehicle of change, steering toward a much better life. But your subconscious is secretly tossing a heavy anchor out the back and slamming on the brakes. So we've got to untangle why that anchor gets thrown in the first place. Looking directly at our source material, the answer lies in a genuinely shocking reality about how our brains process self-improvement. To our internal systems, getting better literally feels threatening. Now, those two words seem wildly out of place when we're talking about adopting a healthy habit like drinking more water or, say, trying out meditation, but we really have to stop and marvel at how strange this is. Our mind interprets positive growth as an actual, literal threat. It doesn't just feel slightly uncomfortable, no. It triggers the exact same neurological alarm bells as if you were about to step out into oncoming traffic. Your system actually categorizes growth as a monster, lurking in the shadows. So, who exactly is orchestrating this massive threat response? Who's in there ringing the alarm bells when you simply try to, eat a salad instead of doom scrolling? Well, ironically enough, the main suspect is your own brain. It's just working overtime to try and protect you from what it mistakenly perceives as imminent danger. It honestly thinks it's doing you a massive favor. Think of your brain as a hypervigilant bodyguard. And right now, it views your new, healthy habit as an unauthorized intruder trying to breach the perimeter of your life. The battleground inside your mind really comes down to a clash between two totally different versions of you. On one hand, you have the warm, tangled safety of the familiar identity. On the other side is the stark, kind of terrifying blankness of the uncertain identity. Every single time you try to improve, your brain weighs these two options, and almost every single time it vastly prefers the worn-in comfort of who you already are over the terrifying void of who you might become. Even if that familiar identity is flawed or unhappy or unhealthy, it is a known quantity. That uncertain identity, even if it represents a drastically better you, is just a scary blank canvas to a brain that absolutely craves predictability above all else. Now, if your brain is pulling the fire alarm over a simple jogging routine, what exactly is it trying so hard to save? The motive is actually incredibly simple. It is fiercely protecting the known. To our primal evolutionary wiring, the status quo, even if that status quo is super stressful, chaotic, or physically unhealthy, literally equals survival. You survived yesterday doing exactly what you did, right? So from a purely biological standpoint, the brain just wants you to do it all over again today. It sees absolutely no reason to risk the unknown just because you decided you want a six-pack or a cleaner kitchen. Survival depends on repetition, not revolution. This brings us to a really crucial, formal concept, the familiar identity. This is the established version of yourself that the brain prefers over an uncertain one, actively pulling you back to it. Think about the labels you might subconsciously wear, the chronic procrastinator, the night owl, or the person who just isn't good at math. These aren't just quirky personality traits, they are deeply ingrained psychological blueprints. Your brain values the predictability of these familiar identities far, far more than the objective goodness of any new habit. Because to your brain, predictability equals safety. Your mind will always choose the safety of the known over the peril of the unprecedented. Building on that tension, what specifically triggers those defense mechanisms the exact moment we attempt to shed those old labels? What does that active resistance actually look like? When we take that brave first step toward becoming someone completely new? Well, when you lace up those running shoes for the very first time, or finally sit down to budget your finances, you aren't just doing a simple task. You are threatening the established order. It's like you're poking a sleeping bear. And let me tell you, the reaction to that threat is swift, it's subtle, and it is incredibly effective at shutting you down. Let's walk through the literal chain reaction, the exact playbook your brain uses to restore order. Imagine you decide, okay, I'm going to stop eating junk food. Step 1, you attempt the positive change and pack a healthy lunch. Step 2, your brain detects a deviation from the familiar script. An uncertain identity, the healthy eater, is forming, and boom, the alarms go off. Step 3, it immediately begins to quietly pull you back. Maybe it suddenly makes you feel impossibly exhausted or incredibly irritable right around 2 p.m. This is an automated, highly efficient process designed to keep you safely tethered to who you've always been, well before that healthy eater can take over the system. Our source text actually describes this process perfectly, noting how the mind is, quote, quietly pulling people back to their old selves. The absolute most dangerous word there is quietly. Your brain doesn't announce what it's doing with a giant megaphone. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, I'm sabotaging you now. Instead, it subtly redirects your energy. It manifests as a sudden, inexplicable loss of motivation, a mysterious wave of brain fog, or an overwhelming, highly rationalized craving for a donut simply because you earned it. This stealthy sabotage is exactly why our own failures feel so frustrating. We don't even realize the pull is happening until we find ourselves sitting right back on the couch, right back where we started. So let's summarize this ruthless but predictable cycle. Positive change creates uncertainty. That uncertainty is perceived as a life or death threat by your primal wiring. And in response to that perceived threat, the brain rapidly defaults back to the familiar identity to reestablish safety. I really want you to take this away today. Struggling with a new positive routine is not laziness. It is absolutely not a fundamental lack of character or discipline. It is simply your brain's ancient hardwired survival mechanism desperately prioritizing comfort over progress. You are quite literally fighting millions of years of evolutionary programming that just wants to keep you safe in the cave. Knowing everything we've just uncovered about this intense, hardwired threat response, we are left with a massive question to wrap up this explainer. Will your brain always choose the familiar over the better? Now that you can literally see the mechanics of your own self-sabotage and you understand that your mind is really just a scared bodyguard trying to protect you, the challenge becomes crystal clear. How will you eventually outsmart your brain's deep-seated love for the familiar, soothe its primal fears, and finally make positive change feel safe enough to actually stick?